Welcome to the LSI Behind the Wind podcast. I'm Lauren Lane. For 50 years now, the LSI team has dedicated themselves to the science of business development. We've seen the impact of our work and how it's evolved into economic development and now social impact work. This week, we are fortunate to be joined by one of the newest members of the LSI team, Cedric Macklin. Cedric is our business development and community outreach manager and is based in Memphis, Tennessee. Cedric has over 20 years of community outreach experience in higher education and is well-versed in societal problems affecting the Memphis areas. Today, we will be discussing how to build trust among members of disenfranchised communities, the pros and cons of higher education in rural communities, and how the BIL funding can support and lift entire cities and the individual. Thanks for joining us today. We really hope this episode is impactful and helpful, and we hope you enjoy this episode.
Cedric, I'm so excited to have you as a guest on the Behind the Wind podcast today, and been looking forward to this for several weeks. And you're a relatively new account executive with us, based in Memphis. And I've got a lot of questions about that. But before we start, would you just talk a bit about your background and just give us your biography, which is very interesting.
Thank you again for this opportunity. And I'm very appreciative for this opportunity to speak with you. And just kind of want to give a little bit on my background from what I like to call from then to now, because it's definitely been a transformation. I'm from a small farming town in Arkansas, which is roughly 30 to 40 minutes from downtown Memphis, Tennessee. I grew up in a household with 11 siblings, 11 brothers and sisters, and I was number 10. So oftentimes, if you did not strategically sit on the bus and get off as one of the first, you may have missed a plate, just to make it long.
Oh, my goodness.
So that was definitely an interesting upbringing. Like I said, we're a farming family. We chopped cotton. We did cotton. We did beans. We had livestock. We planted gardens. We fished and hunted a lot to kind of supplement in those years where the harvest just didn't quite do what we needed it to do. And I tell you this, I spent more time contemplating life after childhood and what I would do so that I wouldn't have to be one who lived in the manner in which I did growing up.
Absolutely.
In school, while I probably should have been paying attention to the instructors, I spent my time thinking about what I was going to do so that I wouldn't have to be a farmer, to make a long story short. So that was the gist of my childhood. And one day, sitting on our front porch with my mom, as a little fella, probably about 8 years old, maybe a little younger, we started talking about college and the process and the cost and everything involved. And with her infinite wisdom, she's like, young man, you're probably one of the smartest, which I still to this day doubt. Has some super intelligent brothers and sisters, and still do. I shouldn't say had, because a lot of them are still here.
They're going to come after you.
Absolutely.
They're going to listen to this and come after you.
Right. And one of the things that she said to me was, you might want to consider joining the military, because that'll kind of help you pay for college. And initially, I was kind of feeling some kind of way about it, but I'm like, oh, okay, I can do that. I've grown up in a home that was basically ruled by an iron fist. And long story short, when it was time to go out and chop the cotton or feed the hogs or the goats or the cows, we had a little bit of everything. That's what you had to do. So my thought was this: if I can endure that, then I should be able to endure boot camp and do fine in the military. So I did just that. My 11th grade year, I actually joined the Army National Guard, and went through my training at the end of my 11th grade year. So I did boot camp, end of 11th grade, went back, graduated from high school, and did my specialty training after graduating from high school. Shortly after that, I enrolled at Arkansas State University with the idea that I was going to pursue a career in law enforcement. So I decided to get a degree in criminology with all goals of working for the state police.
Wow.
And while going through the process, completing paperwork, and ultimately I was called, but I had accepted a job with Youth Villages, which is a behavioral children's home. My location was in Bartlett, Tennessee. And so I began doing that work and kind of found myself liking it from the standpoint because I realized I could make a difference in the life of children who were kind of in a pretty adverse situation. So I did fairly well in that position, and it quickly led to an advancement. I got promoted into what they refer to as the vocational battery coordinator.
Right.
So I began doing vocational battery testing for all of their different sites. And obviously, they still liked the work that I was doing because they promoted me again. And this time, they actually sent me back to Jonesboro, Arkansas, which is where I graduated from my undergrad college career at. So I helped open their first outreach office in Arkansas. So that was pretty cool. I kind of like to brag about that a little bit.
Yes.
Found myself back in Jonesboro, and ultimately, I got the office set up. Everything was going great. And I decided to go and visit my old work study supervisor. Emma Dunn always referred to me as she was my mom away from home. And when Miss Emma Dunn asked me to do something, that's what I did. So sitting in the office visiting with Miss Dunn, she basically said, son, there's a job in admissions that I want you to apply for, and you're going to get it.
Oh, my goodness.
I'm like, okay. Very interesting. So about 2 weeks later, I found myself interviewing for that job, and I got it.
Wow.
And that started my career in higher education. And I went on to work a little over 22, 23 years, which is the bulk of my career experience. And actually, that's what I did prior to coming on board with LSI.
Right.
So that's the gist in terms of my academic and my early career ventures. Any thoughts on that, Sean? I know that.
I've got a lot of thoughts. I can't wait to dig into this. So tell me what the age difference was in your siblings. You said you were 10 of 11.
Right.
What was the age difference between you and your oldest sibling and you and your youngest sibling?
So my oldest sibling, she was about 20 years older than me.
Wow.
Youngest sibling, probably roughly 5 years younger than me.
So, I mean, that is a huge span with 11 kids. Maybe just, I've spent a lot of time in Memphis, in the Eastern Arkansas region. And maybe talk about what we refer to as the Delta as well. I'd like, before we talk about some of the strategy and whatnot that we have for this region, I'd like just for you to lay a foundation of what this looks like and the relationship to Memphis and Eastern Arkansas, and just talk about the Delta region in general.
Right. So the Delta, it was pretty much indicative of the kind of childhood upbringing that I mentioned to you, because most of the cities that fall within what we refer to as the Delta region are those areas that are right along the Mississippi River. Most of them were built around the farming industry. We didn't have the advances that are used today in farming. Ironically, I could kind of see myself doing it now based on some of the luxuries. I spent a little time working with a group of kids where I take kids to the woods to kind of get them exposed to the outdoors, way of life and outdoors. And oftentimes we prepare our land by planting food plots, primarily for turkey, because we like to take them turkey hunting, because if we get them hooked on turkey hunting, we figure we got them hooked for life. So that's been something that I've really enjoyed. And one of the guys who's a part of this particular club came down this past weekend with this big tractor that he said cost $115,000, and it's air conditioned, and it looks like a Mercedes. I'm like, what is this? and just thinking back, growing up, and the little tractors that we had to drive, it was no cab on the top of it, and pretty much no shocks, and the seat had no cushion. I mean, it was rough. But in any case, the work that we had to do, and we have quite a bit of land that we lease in order for these type of activities. And just in a matter of a small amount of time, he was able to till all of that soil. We planted it and was ready to go. I'm like, this is how you're supposed to do it.
No
So,
kidding.
but going back to the Delta, kind of like I was saying, it's all built around farming, and there's some industries, but long story short, there are some challenges that persist in the Delta with the persistent poverty counties. If you pay close attention, most of those are those Delta counties. Those areas were plagued by a few things. Number one, the farming industry totally changed. It was
Yes.
transformed from being one that required tons of hands to conduct the work to little to no hands because of the machinery, the modern machinery.
Right.
So that industry died, which meant that the populations declined because people had to find a place to work. Some actually went to a few of the local industries. You had a few steel mills, but just not too much. A couple shoe factories, but not many other means for making a living, if you will. So a lot of people ended up relocating to places like Detroit to take advantage of the auto industry and working at some of those factories. Some decided to embrace education and went to college. Oftentimes they become teachers, coaches, and for the most part, some would major in agriculture. But for the most part, though, that area, the Delta, that is commonly known and commonly is also associated with poverty. And I think the primary reason for that correlation, that connection, is because of the decline of the farming industry and the lack of jobs that were available to people in the area.
It is per capita one of the poorest regions in the United States and has been for a lot of years. And it's also one of the still one of the most racially divided areas of the United States as well. I mean, can you talk about that?
Right. And I can speak about that really from a sociological standpoint. I think it is a racially divided area. And I think the reason for that is, once again, it had a lot to do with the farming industry. Most of the landowners provided the means for employment for minorities. The Caucasians actually owned or leased the land. Minorities worked for them.
Yep.
So again, when the demise of the farming industry surfaced, it kind of left minorities in a position where, either they stayed and were fortunate enough to get a job in one of the other industries, like I was speaking of, or they just kind of planted their gardens and did whatever they could to survive. So instantly that created a strong division between the races. And to this day, it's kind of still that way. I have a couple friends that stay close to. We did things in high school and had similar careers, if you will. Oftentimes they ridicule me for staying in the area.
Wow.
Like, how do you know what you know and do what you do and still insist on staying in that area? And let me tell you why. There are challenges. There is extreme poverty rate. There is a lack of opportunities because I oftentimes compare myself to those around me and those in other areas of the country with the credentials that I bring to the table. Undoubtedly, my career would have been a lot more fruitful. But there does come a time in life where you realize that it's not all about economic prosperity. And that really happened to me during my first job when I started working with behavioral children who basically had no one. And building trust in them and seeing them understand and appreciate you just kind of gave me a sense of oh, wow, it's a blessing to have the opportunity to work with them, to make a long story short. And that same thought process kind of transferred over to higher education because a significant number of the students that presented, of course, they didn't have obvious behavior issues, but they did have challenges. And a lot you can associate with poverty. Socioeconomic challenges is what kind of plagued their ability to be successful or not. I tell people all the time, it was funny because other than the time that I recruited for Arkansas State University, I pretty much managed a campus with little to no help. and my students would present, and sometimes they'd be hungry. I found myself ordering pizzas out of pocket. They would show up with clothes that were not adequate for class. They may have not had socks on. Found myself, like I said, ordering pizza. I learned to keep a stash of socks from the local dollar store and put powder. I did whatever it took to help make them feel more comfortable. And all of that, I can definitely say it has a relationship with the type of poverty that's in the area. And it is serious, and there are a lot of different factors that go along with that. And I'll definitely probably talk about this a little later when we start talking about our business development.
Right.
One is trust. I mean,
For sure.
people in the area, unfortunately, it's difficult for them to trust you. And I
Exactly.
kind of understand it. And the reason I say that is because they've been burned so many times. Their thought process is that the average individual that comes before them is looking for some way to harm them.
Right.
So I think all of that plays a role in poverty. I think it plays a specific role in the Delta.
Absolutely. And that's why we were so excited to connect with you and then eventually have you join our team. Before we dive into this, which I'm really excited to discuss this with you, but one other element of the Delta region that I want you to lay a foundation is this divide. I mean, we've talked now about the agricultural heritage of this area, the legacy and history of this area being very racially divided, but the geography is interesting as well. I mean, talk about the relationship between Memphis and the whole eastern Arkansas region. That's a very unique element and has, I think, contributed to some of these challenges as well.
I think it definitely attributed to some of the challenges, but also I want to say this, I think it presented opportunities for those who may have otherwise not have had some of the opportunities that they've had. And when I say that, I'm speaking of opportunities in logistics. FedEx has been a major player for a long time and has employed a significant number of people from Arkansas. And now you have Amazon that's doing the same thing. But back to the barriers, I think sitting in my office in West Memphis when I was working in higher education, and speaking with students about some of the things that they could do if they would decide to go to Memphis or consider looking for opportunities in Tennessee. They had a phobia about crossing the bridge. And, and that's the bridge from Arkansas into Tennessee, into Memphis, Tennessee, for whatever reason.
And it's over the Mississippi River, right?
Yes, sir, over the Mississippi River, and some people just wouldn't do it. And it was ironic because in working in the youth service industry, I encountered people from Tennessee who were just as afraid to leave Memphis or the area and cross over into Arkansas. And I never had that fear for whatever reason. I guess it's because of how I was raised, but I thought that was kind of interesting.
So it's a very unique part of the country where you have a workforce that lives in a different state and crosses over the bridge every day to work in this urban area, and then yet in Arkansas, it's very rural and very agrarian, and so it's. I think that all of those elements have contributed to this unique socio and economic foundation in this area.
Right, and I think also a big part of that was, unfortunately, the education system.
Exactly.
And I'm not pointing fingers, but from that standpoint, I mean, think about my childhood. I was fortunate. I was able to go to school, but there were expectations immediately after school.
Right.
Consequently, fast forward 10 years, the children weren't even allowed to go to school.
Yeah.
So undoubtedly that played a major barrier in the productivity and the prosperity of the area. So for education, again, is a huge piece because unfortunately, people were not allowed to attend school. My
That's right.
mom was able to attend up until the third grade. My dad wasn't able to attend at all. And so when you do the math on it, and I oftentimes like to tell people this is not a game of chess, it's a game of checkers. It's blatantly obvious why the area lags behind all other places in the country because of that common denominator,
That's right.
which is education. And with education comes other opportunities. And unfortunately, but it's understanding, different industries have challenges relocating to an area where the education level is next to last. So all of it's relative. It all plays a part. I like to tell people all the time, it's a systemic challenge that the only way you're going to fix it is to start at the root, start at the causal factors. And a big part of that is education. A big part of that is the family and the destruction of the family, if you will. There's a lot of different variables at work that if I were in the position, I would start by dissecting each of those variables and starting from the bottom.
That's right. One of the things that I want to dive into, as you know, we've had a long history of going into a region and building jobs and building high wage jobs and really transforming a region. I think one of my, I mean, we've got so many examples of this over the last 50 years, really, that we've been doing this. But in the last 25 years, in my time with LSI, and one of the projects that I'm really proud of is the work that we've done with the Alaska Native communities in Alaska, and in a lot of ways very similar, where these communities were geographically challenged, not a lot of jobs, racially divided for 200 years, and a lot of, even though I mean you don't think about Alaska and Arkansas and Tennessee being similar, the reality is in so many ways, when I look back 25 years ago, going into some of these areas that were very agrarian, these families had lived off the land for a lot of years, very racially divided, just not a lot of jobs. And we went in and transformed these communities through job creation, placement. That led to exactly what you and I have talked about previously, opportunities for education. And in the end, I mean, I am even more certain and committed that the way to transform a community is through income. And what we've seen in a lot of these communities is they went from having minimal opportunities for education to everybody graduates from high school, everybody gets a higher ed degree, even if it's a vocational school, and they have absolutely reduced domestic violence and addiction and some of the social challenges that had plagued these communities for years. And our vision is to do that in the Delta region, and have already started, which I'm really excited about. And I'd love to hear you talk about some of your work and this strategy that we've put together for this area, because I'm so excited about it. I think that especially, I for years I've been a part of a lot of the tech schools and vocational schools that, I'm watching these graduates that they spend 2 years getting a certification, and they're able to migrate off of public assistance and provide for their families and have opportunities through income for education and that they wouldn't have otherwise had.
This is the type of conversation that's really dear to my heart because of the kind of work that I've done prior to now, and sitting in a seat where I kind of had an instrumental part as to whether or not students were able to be successful in their pursuit of a traditional education. And in the midst of doing that, what I was able to find was that a significant number of those students shouldn't have really been pursuing a traditional degree. And the reason for that is there's not a labor force for it. The labor force is more indicative of certifications, whether it's short term, 6 months or 2 years, certifications in manufacturing. I just met with a manufacturing company a week ago, and the opportunities are amazing. You would be amazed of what a kid could make out of high school with a 6 month certification.
Absolutely.
That's life changing. That's transformative. That will help ultimately transform the entire region. Imagine having multiple entities in place, such as this manufacturing company.
Right.
Then you began to change the dialogue. You began to change the conversation as it relates to areas such as the Delta. We're fortunate we've been working with local mayors. From a strategy standpoint, when I first started really conceptualizing what we're attempting to do and knowing the opportunities, and I don't like to speak just about challenges, but there are opportunities as well. But knowing what those opportunities were, knowing that there are key people that you have to have a direct phone call with, that
That's right.
has to happen. And so that was one of the first things that I started doing. I started making calls, reaching back to people that I'd encountered throughout my 20 plus year career in higher ed. Finding those significant beings who had a voice and
Yes.
also had influence, because going back to what I was saying a second ago, unfortunately, there are trust issues. And sometimes those trust issues can diminish the likelihood that an outside entity is able to come in. Although the ultimate goal is to help transform the region, got to build trust. You got to build trust. And I've been fortunate because 23 years in higher ed, being a pillar of the community, being on tons of different committees, volunteering for CASA, volunteering for Meals on Wheels, you name it. I did things to make myself visible in the community, and ultimately I now realize how important that was, because I kind of have a reputation that's positive. So you can pretty much trust him because he's really trying to help make a difference. That's what I found. And so I've been able to get into rooms that otherwise probably would have been a little bit more difficult to get into. So pulling on that network that I spoke about, being invited in, I spent a lot of time listening. I spent a whole lot of time listening and truly absorbing what was perceived through their lenses as being their real challenges. And I would hear stuff, and I knew it because I'm from the area, and I traveled throughout just pretty much all the persistent poverty counties in Arkansas. I've had a presence in. So I know about flooding. I know about the food deserts. All this, I'm sitting there listening now. I'm taking it in, but I'm like, wow, I can't believe it's still like this. I know about the brown water coming from the faucet. I know about oftentimes having to boil your water before you can consume it. So I know a lot of these challenges, but I'm still attentive in terms of listening to their challenges, because at the end of the day, if I'm not willing to sit and listen and show concern, then automatically I diminish the likelihood that engagement will occur and the trust process will start. Another thing, Sean, that I found to be extremely important, and it kind of relates to trust too, following up and doing what you say you're going to do.
That's right.
I'll get emails, and I was telling a good friend of mine, I'm like, you know what? I'm measuring success by what's going on right now. And right now, what I'm getting is I'm actually having individuals to reach out to me, as opposed to early on, I had to do all the cold calling.
That's right.
I'm still traveling from place to place, just introducing myself and explaining what we're doing.
Yep.
But I'm gradually seeing a change as to where they're now starting to reach out to me. And for me, that's a measure of success. I like to speak about that a lot. Another thing, I was sitting in in a little town in Arkansas, and there was like 7 people in the room, and there were a committee that was working on trying to establish a boys and girls club. And oh my, you would think these people never met each other. They were going at each other in a
Oh,
manner. I'm
my
like, oh
goodness.
wow. And the mayor was there, and she was like, "You guys are really disappointing me in front of this nice young man. I can't believe you're acting like this." And I just sat and listened. Once again, I think you have to be a good listener. And when they finally decided maybe we need to be quiet and listen for a change, and I just told them, I'm like, guys, I want to pat you on the back because what you're showing me is passion. You're showing me that you have passion about this cause. Otherwise, you wouldn't have the type of conflict that you have. And you obviously trust each other, or you wouldn't be here. You're obviously committed to your cause, or you wouldn't be here. You're not getting paid to do what you do. So I applaud your efforts. And I want to suggest one thing, and that is regardless of the wealth of knowledge, regardless of the age, regardless of the backgrounds, education credentials don't really matter. What truly matters here is that you have the same goal. And with that same goal in mind, each opinion, although the person beside you may not agree with it, is valuable. So that kind of stole the show. And then I later told them that, guys, that was something I stole from one of my higher education books called The 5 Functions of a Team. Dysfunctions of a Team is a later version of it. And basically what that book says is that in order to accomplish a goal, you got to have trust, you got to be committed, you got to be willing to have healthy conflict. Don't be afraid to fight if that's going to help you get closer to your goal. You also have to be accountable and be willing to help those around you be accountable. And I often hear from one of those committee members, they're still trucking right along on developing that Boys and Girls Clubs. I know that's kind of the long version, but that's just an example of some of the things that occur in the area. And a strategy for me is this. They trust me, or they wouldn't continue to reach out. And that's the branding that I want to see LSI have in this area.
I think one of the things you said about education, I want to pull on that lever a little bit. What we have seen in a lot of regions is similar to what you have seen in the Delta as well. Mm-hmm. And especially in the South, we for years we've been working with communities that have received funding for a lot of different programs. I mean, one of the things that I have been thinking of for some time is in the South, the tobacco settlement funds went to a lot of these tobacco communities, and the funding from the settlements, which was billions of dollars, went to giving these traditional tobacco families money for their children to go to school. I mean, it was a scholarship throughout the South, and even some of the northern communities received this tobacco settlement funding as well. Billions of dollars, they went into scholarships, and these kids would go get a degree in marketing or business or whatever it was. They would come back, and it didn't break the intergenerational poverty cycle. It did not accomplish what the states and municipalities had envisioned, which was, if we give these families money for school, their kids will go to college, they'll get a degree, it'll reduce poverty, and it didn't. A lot of it was, as you said, the wrong degree, the wrong training, and there were no jobs anyway. They came back to these small communities in the South, and there were no jobs. And so you'd have these kids with a degree in marketing or business or management, and so what? It didn't matter. They went back onto the farms and were perpetuating this intergenerational poverty. What I think the LSI methodology and what was really different as we went into a lot of these small communities, especially in the South, we said, we're not doing that. We are going to create the jobs. We're going to create the jobs. We're going to place the individuals into those jobs, and we're going to work with those individuals. And it's going to be a community effort. We would go in, still to this day, we'll go into these communities and create large blocks of jobs. And for a small community, that might be 200 individuals. It might be 50 individuals, whatever that is. We'll create a block of jobs. We'll place those individuals into these jobs and then see this transformation. And that's what I've loved about this vision that we've shared in the Delta, which is the workforce and the labor supply needs to be married with these high-wage jobs that will end this intergenerational poverty in that region. And I just think there is such an opportunity, and I'd like, for the time that we have left, I'd like to talk about the opportunity that exists today with the funding coming to a lot of states and municipalities through the IIJA or BIL, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, IIJA, or, I mean, it's also referred to, as many people have heard, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which is a $2 trillion fund to really accomplish all the things that LSI has been doing for 50 years. Infrastructure, education, workforce development, and really creating this ecosystem to end in intergenerational poverty in a region. And so, it's probably the most complex engagement I've had the opportunity to work with our team in my career, and it really is so exciting to look at all of the barriers for the last 200 years that have perpetuated this intergenerational poverty in the Delta. We now have an opportunity to resolve.
Early on, when we first started meeting and discussing this issue, automatically, wow, this is a game changer. If embraced, this could probably do more to diminish some of the challenges the Delta and areas similar have faced forever, just to make a long story short. This could really change the dynamics. Now, I also, once again, being a higher ed professional in the past, I think it's also going to transform traditional higher education, if you will. And also, I think it'll kind of make a difference on the K-12 experience as well, because I think what we'll start seeing is an opportunity for children to graduate from high school and have a skill set that they could actually take directly into a job and earn adequate wages. In some cases, they'll earn wages that far exceed those who have degrees. Anytime you can transform an area like that, and I'm not even going to begin to talk about the infrastructure. I've been in certain offices and we've had some 100+ days in the area. Air conditioner really didn't even work. You'd be amazed at the conditions. And I'm like, this should not be happening today.
No.
Now, here's an opportunity to fix it if we embrace. And so I spent a lot of time educating people on these opportunities, educating people on the fact that this law is going to do things for the South that's never been seen before. We're going to be able to fix those flooding problems. And it is a problem. We're going to be able to do something with our dilapidated schools that we're asking our children to participate in the learning process in. Unfortunately, regardless of what people want to say, if it's not aesthetically appealing, if the conditions aren't right, if the air conditioner's not right, if the water's not good, the learning is not going to be what it should be.
That's
Long
right.
story short, this is an opportunity to fix it. As of now, unfortunately, there's a process used where we'll assess students based on their aptitude on traditional tests. The true assessment comes in terms of, in my opinion, interest inventories and finding out what it is this child has an interest in so that we can adequately place them on a career track that's going to help them have a healthy life and earn decent wages.
Right.
Because all students, like it or not, ready for a traditional college algebra class or trigonometry class, and they simply weren't going to be successful. Same thing with composition. So why are we testing them to place them into these classes? Number one, we know there's a strong likelihood they're not going to be successful. And then number two, the labor force really is not conducive to those type of degrees that we're pushing students towards getting.
I totally agree. And I mean, some of the things that we're working through this Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act include, water, energy, the infrastructure that is so needed. I mean, you talked about the problem with flooding and resilience and redundancy. It is an opportunity for us to modernize and prepare these communities in the Delta region for the next 50 years. And we're pulling funding down for bridges, roads, broadband in rural areas, transportation, which is so critical and a key to this. Looking at the workforce development in education, and not just traditional education, but certification, and even getting TANF eligible, WIOA eligible individuals into the workforce, and then giving them mentoring, apprenticeships, and opportunities for certifications and higher education. It is just I'm as you can tell, I'm so passionate about this, like you are, developing a long-term ecosystem. What I think is so interesting is in a lot of these urban areas, there's negative unemployment, meaning that if you're an employer in a region that has negative unemployment, you can't find people. You cannot find employees. You cannot fill even basic skill sets like accounting, marketing, IT, software development. And a lot of these skills are not, you don't need a 4-year degree to fill these skills. Number two, a lot of these positions can be worked virtually in a region like the Delta. So I'm so excited to create this ecosystem, taking the best of class of the LSI methodology in all of these areas, and really focusing on my vision, my goal, and I know yours as well, which is ending this intergenerational poverty that exists in that region.
Absolutely. You said it best, and it is something that's dear to my heart, and always has been. Again, even as a young guy, I'm like, wow. I mean, help me understand why people have to go without eating. This should not happen. And I've been in some rooms where pessimists who would automatically think that people are in the conditions that they're in by their own choosing. And that's just not the case.
No.
Consequently, that is the case sometimes, but the majority of the times it's intergenerational. And it's a system of challenges that have been created outside of anyone's ability to change. And with that being said, I can truly speak about it because I've been fortunate to basically have two careers, and I know what it's like to have to go a day or two without eating. I know what that's like. I know what it's like to have to work two and sometimes three jobs just to make sure that all the bills are paid, and you're not looking at a negative bank account. I know what it's like for people to present in front of me and say, I did not do my homework because the lights were out.
Right.
Or the internet's not working. I get it. I totally get it. And these are all issues that are relevant and common in these areas. And again, I'm super excited about the opportunity to be able to at least start the process of diminishing some of those challenges and helping this area to do what it needs to do to really become a viable part of this country.
Absolutely. Well, I just am so excited about this potential. I'm so excited about the opportunities in this region and already what we have done to pull best practices throughout the United States into the Delta region and elsewhere. And so if listeners of this episode are managing state entities, managing municipalities, universities, any kind of trade school that or is focused on economic development, workforce development, social impact, creating jobs and ending poverty, ending this intergenerational poverty, which is really what we're talking about. Please talk to Cedric and he can help you with a strategy and help you capture some of this $2 trillion. We're now closing in on about 13 months left of this funding being available. So there is some urgency, I think, for communities, for states, municipalities, universities, trade schools, organizations that want to capture this funding. Get with Cedric. He can help you with a strategy on how to put this together and implement this LSI methodology in your area. So Cedric, this has been amazing. We'll do some more of this, subsequent episodes as well. I really appreciate you spending the time with Lauren and me this afternoon and talking about something that I'm so passionate about, and I know you are as well.
Absolutely. And again, thanks a whole lot. I enjoy this kind of thing because it gives me a voice. Whereas I have a significant amount of great relationships and good cluster of people who kind of know how I work. Absolutely. This gives me a voice that I wouldn't have otherwise. And it really helps me become a major part of the solution.
I agree. Well, just get your siblings to go out and evangelize this. We'll have half the Delta.
Absolutely, and they won't take offense to it because, fortunately, that's just how life was back then. You had to have big families in order to harvest.
That's right. That's exactly right.
That's what we did.
Exactly. Cedric, thanks again. Thanks for being part of our team. And we're having so much fun having you part of this organization and implementing these strategies. So look forward to some other discussions with you.
Looking forward to it, Sean.
Take care.
Thanks a bunch.
Thank you.